so hopefully, today, inshallah, we'll be celebrating many treasured memories. And we're so grateful to you for sharing your thoughts and your anecdotes of Meryl's life and your interactions with her. The only thing is I ask is if you could limit your memories just to sort of no more than 5 or 10 minutes, just so that we can all have time to celebrate our gregarious Welsh friend. May she rest in eternal peace. Oh, I didn't realize how emotional this would be. So what can I say about Merrill? So Merrill had the most brilliant sense of humor. She was not just a truly warm and thoroughly pleasant person to spend time with, but as I came to learn when I became her deputy in 2010, I think it was when I first met Merrill and when I first joined the Muslim Institute. She had a sort of an unparalleled intellect and a breadth of knowledge that I've really rarely seen before or since. I've always been struck by her wealth of knowledge that she could apply to almost sort of any topic that might happen to arise. When I first joined the Muslim Institute, I just come back from a few months traveling in South America, and Merrill was able to talk authoritatively about all the places I'd visited sort of seamlessly. As an anthropologist, she was genuinely inquisitive, and of course a voracious reader, hence her vast knowledge, and she was so deeply committed to the concept of social justice. She really understood the context of power and privilege of those who were involved in framing interrogative arguments. And she was really unafraid to eviscerate an argument that didn't make any sense. But she would undertake sort of any intellectual duel with so much grace and humor. And I think that's what made her all the more effective as a speaker and as a thinker. I think, when I think of Merrill, what I think of is someone who could take a casual remark or statement made by someone, and we saw this repeatedly in the winter gatherings at Sarum College or any of the events that we had. She could take a remark made by someone else and contextualize it and contextualize it with broader detail, or if necessary, challenge and interrogate a weak or ill thought out comment with facts. She was always applying the concept of critical thinking, and that's something that she always championed. And I think she really helped me to understand why the work of the Muslim Institute was so important, because she talks about why it was vital to elevate those voices that are seldom heard or which are rendered voiceless because they have been appropriated by others and misrepresented. She always emphasized that what we need to do is to tell our own stories, to be introspective, and only then can we be the architects of solutions to our issues, instead of having solutions imposed upon us as a set of communities. She always advocated, for these conversations that many of us hold in private to be made visible, and that's what the Muslim Institute is for, to provide a platform for these conversations. Because she would always say to me, if you have a seemingly unchanging stereotype, you won't see signs of change. So I guess I owe Merrill a debt of gratitude for sort of helping me to understand the way in which the Muslim Institute is a vital, offers a vital contribution to the conversations that impact our communities. I will miss talking to her about the state of the world. I'll miss our unending gossip sessions. And I really feel that, as a set of communities, we're so much poorer for losing her unique perspective and her contribution to our conversations. but today, you know, we can celebrate her rich and eclectic and fascinating life. And I look forward to bringing those memories alive today with you, with your stories about Merrill and about the various stages of her life. So I'll now hand over to Ehsan. Ehsan, perhaps you would like to sort of say a few words to share your memories.
Thanks. Thank you, Samia. Good evening and Assalamu alaikum, everybody. It's a really sad evening. I'm Ehsan Masood and I represent the trustees of the Muslim Institute. As many of you will know, Merryl was our founding director, and she came on board at a really pivotal time for the Institute when we were just transitioning from one organization to another. And it was, as Samia, as you said, it was an incredible privilege for so many of us to have worked with Merryl in the last decade of her life. And as we'll hear this evening, Merryl leaves a really critical legacy, not only for the work that she did at the Institute, but to be honest, you know, much more broadly as a thinker, as a writer, as a broadcaster and an activist. And just as you were saying, just as an all-round very cool person to be with. I'm just going to really speak for a few minutes. And the Merryl I'm going to talk about briefly is not, in fact, the Merryl of the Muslim Institute. It's a very different Merryl. And the person that I will always remember, who I encountered as a much younger person when I was an undergraduate in Portsmouth on the south coast of England, a Muslim student searching for identity and trying to make sense of belief and who I was and where I came from in very secular post-war, post-imperial Britain. And like many of us on this call, I met Merryl through her books and through her talks and through her television appearances. She was quite a regular presence on television. And she was a complete star on Britain's university campuses, particularly in the different Muslim student societies. And then something happened, of course. Merryl became essential reading and viewing, especially after the late 1980s, during and after the Satanic Verses affair. And it is just incredibly hard now to explain just how pivotal that period was for the generation of us that are now in our 40s and 50s and 60s, and for our wider families. The context, of course, as many of you will know, is that Salman Rushdie wrote a book, an influential British Asian novelist, writes a novel that has practically the entire Muslim world on strike. There were marches and demonstrations, books were burned, there was the death sentence from Iran's government, and hundreds of people died in disturbances. And of course, Rushdie goes into hiding. And it was impossible to bring a copy of the book home, because if you did, it just completely turned you into some kind of apostate. And then on the other side, you had a very different kind of anger and confusion. Like, who are these strange people called Muslims? Why can't they take criticism? And why are they so intolerant? And why do they always shout? And every night, you know, I'd come home from classes and lectures and be sitting in the kitchen and turn on the TV. You open the newspapers and you listen to your radio, and there were these complete binaries at work. On the one side, you had outraged liberal Britain, and on the other side, you had this very indignant group of always shouting Muslims. So if anyone was trying to process what was happening, there were hardly any voices on either side who could just explain or contextualize or provide reasoning or reflection or analysis of what was going on. But there was Merryl, and Merryl was there for all of us, those of us particularly in universities and colleges. She was one of a very tiny sliver of people who were doing just that. And if you were in your teens and 20s at the height of the Satanic Verses affair, knowing that there were writers and artists, that there were Muslims like Merryl and Zia Sardar and Zafar Malik and the late Fuad Nahdi, who we also lost this year, and Abdul Wahab Effendi, people articulating the hurt and contextualizing it and building bridges. It was literally like finding water in the desert. And it was through their work that people like myself, often those of us science trained, that we discovered Orientalism and the history of colonization and what happens when powerful people subjugate the weak. And we just wouldn't be doing what we do now if it wasn't for Merrill. Her death is a very, very sad loss. And I hope that by remembering her tonight, I know we'll be honoring a great life and a truly inspirational person. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ehsan. I'd now like to hand over to Zia, who has been a long time collaborator and friend of Merrill. Zia, perhaps you'd like to share some of your memories and thoughts.
Thank you, Samia. Where does one begin? I mean, Merrill was such a larger than life character. I think what I would like to do is to kind of point out 2 or 3 features of her, which perhaps are not widely known. One, I think Ehsan has already kind of pointed out that Merrill was a genuine original thinker. She was an incredible scholar. I mean, every time I mentioned a book, she had already read it. I mean, she was such a kind of incredible reader and kind of almost encyclopedic in a range. And I think her kind of one of her first books was, of course, Knowing One Another, Shaping an Islamic Anthropology. And I really do think it's a kind of a masterpiece. It's certainly the analysis presented there has not been surpassed by anyone. And the argument that Merrill was presenting there that we need to get away from Western social sciences and create what she called after Ibn Khaldun, ilmul umran, you know, the knowledge of civilization. We should create a kind of Islamic civilization studies, you know, based on adab, notions of adab and so on and so forth. It's a phenomenal book. And I helped edit it. I mean, Merrill was a kind of, she was the original thinker, but she was also a circular thinker. Her ideas often came back, you know, and I had to turn the book into a linear kind of thing. And we had a great time while she was writing and I was editing and then shaping it, doing that book. And then, of course, we followed that with Distorted Imagination, which Ehsan mentioned. I mean, it was a very hard time, the Rushdie affair period, right? We were quite all emotionally drained. And we developed this rapport, you know, of how are we going to deal with this book. So we had this thing, you know, question of the week. And the question was always posed by Merrill. And whatever I answered was dismissed immediately. And then we went and had a long argument out of which the writing came. I mean, a lot of people think that there was a banter between me and Merrill, and some of the things were quite kind of irrelevant and useless. But you know, a great deal of original thought came out from those useless comments, right? And there was this, Merrill was kind of my mirror for ideas, and I kind of reflected her ideas back to her as well. And I mean, this is how I think the strength of Distorted Imagination comes out of that. And many Rushdie supporters acknowledged that the liberal establishment did not have an answer to Distorted Imagination. I mean, intellectually, I think we wiped them out in a sense. And then, of course, we wrote the American theology together, the Why Do People Hate America, and the 2 books that followed that. It was my idea that why do people hate America should not be a question, but an inquiry. And it was Merrill's suggestion that the inquiry should be addressed through Hollywood films, Now, what is not really appreciated is not just that she read almost anything she could lay her hands on, but she also watched every possible film that she could see. She was absolute and utter encyclopedia of knowledge on film. And because of her, why do people hate America? It's not just an inquiry about America. It's also a film book, and in fact, it is now used in film studies courses in certain places, especially in American university. She was a kind of incredible researcher. I think that she got that from her BBC training, where she was a researcher on programs like Everyman and Heart of the Matter, before she went on to become a producer, and then she kind of produced some shows that I also worked on. And this kind of ability, her ability to research things out, right, and come up was kind of absolutely astonishing. I don't think I could have produced half of my work without her comment and her input and her research. I mean, when I was reading the Quran, for example, and I would send her chapters, she will, I mean, if I sent her a chapter of 5,000 words, she will send me 10,000 words of streams of consciousness criticizing what I had written, right? And that kind of engagement, I think, is essential for scholarship. So she was a genuine scholar and original thinker, and I will dearly miss her. Merrill was also a great cook. I think this may not be appreciated by some people who have not eaten, but I think Scott has maybe had some of her cuisine, but we certainly enjoyed it, me and my family. And Merrill cooked the way she wrote. So when the way she wrote was that if you go to her room where she's working, there'd be books all over the place, half open, marked. There'd be a television will be on, and either it will be news or a film she was simultaneously watching. And things will be all over the place. And that's exactly how she cooked. She would have there will always be 2 or 3 ingredients which will be impossible to find, and all of these will be laid out in the kitchen, and the kitchen will be just crowded with stuff laid out before she started cooking. And of course, in between her cooking exercise, she will go outside for a fag, right? And the process will take forever. I mean, she will start cooking, early in the afternoon and carry on cooking till 6 or 7 o'clock at night. She was kind of incredible cook. Just going back to the ideas of film, the Merrill's knowledge of film was so incredible. When we were sharing an apartment in Kuala Lumpur together in the late 80s and early 90s, I was asked to write a chapter for a book that my friend Ashish Nandi was editing. It was a film studies, film theory book called The Sacred History of Our Desires. And so they asked me if I wanted to write something on Dilip Kumar, which I accepted. So I got all the films of Dilip Kumar to watch again. And as I was writing this in Kuala Lumpur, Merrill will insist on sitting with me, watching these films. Mind you, they were in Urdu, and of course she didn't understand a word of Urdu. Yet, within 3 months, she was greater expert on Dilip Kumar than I was. And almost everything that I was writing, she was criticizing and taking apart. So it's a kind of great, she had this kind of ability to synthesize things and learn from them very, very fast. Yeah, as I said, she cooked like the way she wrote. And her final point that I want to make about Merrill is that Merrill was a kind of a every man, every person Auntie G, but in a nice way, and a kind of universal, overgenerous mother, right? She kind of took young people under her care. And there's a string of young people, I mean, not just Hassan Masood, a string of young people she mentored and nursed and nourished. I mean, my 3 kids, it's almost, I mean, she was godmother to them. It's almost that she was a secondary mother to them, and I think she brought them up as much as we did. There was a whole, I remember the Brick Lane Forum or Brick Lane Circle, a group of young Bangladeshi scholars and thinkers and writers. She started mentoring a whole group of them. Or whenever we went, I remember young Salik ringing me the other day because he only met Merrill once. We were coming back from Old Manchester or Oldham, somewhere like that, and he happened to be on the same train. And he sat next to Merrill and talked to her for 3 hours. And he says that those 3 hours transformed his life. Like just the way she kind of took, responded to young people, looked after, helped them not just intellectually but emotionally. Like she had this kind of incredible ability to be the kind of universal mother to all those universal, not just emotional but intellectual mother to all those. I will miss her. I will miss her dearly. Every now and again, over the last 3 or 4 weeks, I've suddenly thought, I wonder what Merrill thinks about it, and I pick up the phone and then realize, of course, there's no one there to answer, because our thought developed and evolved by our engagement, which sometimes could be quite heated, right? But it also generated light, a great deal of light. We fought together, we argued together, we laughed together, right? And we wrote together. I don't think she can be replaced. She's totally irreplaceable. For Samia.
Thank you, Zia. That was quite an insight. I can't believe you actually praised Merrill in your for helping you in your work. That was something that was quite emotional to hear. I believe Guy Sub is here. Guy Sub, would you like to say a few words? I think.
Yes, indeed. I miss her because I remember going to Muslim Institute winter gatherings and finding few faces, smiling faces welcoming us. And one was, of course, Merrill, indeed, which I will miss for life. It was very impressive. A warm welcome to all those who wanted to come and visit the institute gatherings. So this is something I remember, and I'll miss her.
Thank you very much, Guy Sab. Guy Sab, our co-founder of the Muslim Institute. I think, I mean, I can certainly resonate with what Zia was talking about in terms of Merrill mentor. I mean, I'm not so young anymore, but she certainly had a profound impact on me intellectually, and in terms of guiding me and advising me on sort of the growth of thinking. And I will certainly miss discussing the state of the world with her. I think another young person, a genuine young person, is Scott. Scott, you're a genuinely young person. So I mean, you perhaps you can tell us a little bit about sort of Merrill's sort of latest sort of few years in Malaysia, and share some memories.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, young maybe. I don't know. They just had a news article about how millennials were getting scorned by Gen Z, and I was like, what? This can't be happening. Well, I'm not old enough to be having generational wars with people who in my mind are, still running around in diapers. Yeah, but it's a good point that, because I was going to mention that Merrill has this, she's almost a folk character, that sort of spring folk character who adopts lost children and puts them on the right path, which is usually towards a museum or a library or, you know, somewhere where they can further their studies or do this or do that. And so, and even here in Malaysia, because all of Anwar Ibrahim's staff saw her as a aunt, motherly figure, and it was actually very sweet because they were there for the funeral and burial, and they were the last ones to. They had on multiple occasions had to lift her because she had a hospital visit a couple months back, and when she came out of the hospital, she was still quite loopy, and so they had to literally lift her because she had 3 steps to get into her room in the place she was living. To get her into the bed, and it was kind of a weird completing of the circle when they were the ones who actually placed her in her final resting place. So it was very nice. Yeah, Merrill, going down to Merrill's, I always had to remember, I had to clear my schedule because I knew I wasn't going to do anything else for the rest of the day. And I had to watch the clock because if it got too late, I had to make sure I could still get a cab home. But she would always, you know, provide coffee, so that was quite nice. And again, there would always be books all about the place, different ones she'd been reading. CNN was usually on in the background or whatever, depending on the time of day, because she would watch the news, the morning news, but it would be in the afternoon for us, depending on, you know, she'd start with Sky News, BBC, flip over to CNN, I mean, just a complete news junkie. I've never seen someone not only watch, I mean, the amount of news she consumed, I mean, put me to shame because I'm, you know, the one who's supposed to be, she probably knew more about what was happening in America than I did. And I'm the one who's supposed to, you know, try and keep up with what's happening in the place I live in, theoretically. And not only that, but she wouldn't just have all this wealth of what's happening in the world. She'd also sit there and spend 20 minutes criticizing the way that the news crew had framed that shot, or the amount of makeup that person had applied, and how they did the lighting and everything else. So that was always quite fun. And I mean, it's, you know, if you knew her towards the end, you may not have thought that she was the globetrotter she was. I was thinking about this the other day, and I believe the first time I met her was in Chicago in a very high tower. So if you can picture this office space that has all glass windows and it's overlooking Lake Michigan, and there's Merrill just sitting in the corner, you know, just this wise individual, and I'm in this very intimidating room with lots of other people who at the time I had thought were much smarter and much more intellectually savvy than I was. So it was very interesting to meet her as, you know, this council of wise scholarly people, and then getting to know her a lot better when I made my first visit to London, staying with the Sardars, and she felt the need, I don't know why, just a random obligation that because I was going to be there during Christmas, she had to throw a Christmas dinner in this Muslim household. So it was it was just very nice. And yeah, I mean, she sent Zia and I to the store. I don't know how many times we probably walked back and forth, because not only did we go to the Afghani grocery store down on the main street there in Collindale, but we also had to go to Morrison's, and I believe we had to go to all of the grocery stores, if I recall correctly, because you had to get all of the right bits and pieces, and made a wonderful cake, and it was just very nice.
Scott, Scott, do you remember it took us 2 days to clean the dishes afterwards?
Well, yeah, that's, oh my, please. The worst, I think our biggest fear was that if Salia ever had seen the state of her kitchen during the creation of that dinner, never again would any of us have been allowed in that kitchen. Yes, but that was quite the cleanup, I recall. And yeah, no, it was a wonderful little. It was wonderful. It was we had Christmas, and I'm not super. I'm not hung up on traditions and festivals and things like that. So I've just always been, because I've been doing non-Western studies for like a decade now. So I've celebrated everything. And here in Malaysia, you really get the feel of everything kind of gets celebrated. And Merrill had always had a particular fascination with everything gets its due. And because she used to say, I don't know when this changed, but she was always a rigid Republican, and never, anti-monarchy and the English and bugger off and all of that. And then, but she came around to realize that there's an importance behind the traditions that we follow. And it relates to the songs as well, because the funny thing to me, because I always thought it was strange, because Zia, you love Urdu music and listening to Urdu music, and Merrill loved listening to Urdu music, and Merrill doesn't know Urdu. And to me, that always drove me nuts, because I'm like, I can't listen to something that I don't know. And this is why languages are so difficult for me, because I want to know, what every word means and the minutia and all that. And then one day she had me go out, and because she had found this place I found a place that sold CDs, and she had said, oh, is there any Celtic or Gaelic music you can get? And so I found, I don't know, some random collection. And so she started playing it and listening to it. And I said, and she's like sitting there and practically weeping, because, she was also very emotional about art and performance and things like that. And so I was asking her, I'm like, so what does it mean? She's like, I don't have a clue. I was like, what? Oh, I always thought she knew what she didn't know. She knew the bits of Welsh that you get via osmosis growing up in Wales, I suppose. But it was always kind of, because she was always very proud of the fact that she got the one job with the BBC that didn't require Welsh in the BBC offices over in Wales, and so that was quite nice. But also in her travels, she transversed the Sahara Desert 50 years ago. They had their big 50-year anniversary a couple years ago. They got to meet with all of them again. And then she even managed to connect with, there's an expat community here in Malaysia that had been doing like music nights once a month. And so Merrill and I would go out to this, just this fishmonger place. But these folks would play old folk music from Ireland, Scotland, all of that. And so they wanted to organize a poetry reading at some point in time, but I guess they had run into issues with the poetry readings, and so that had never quite materialized. But what's nice is I always enjoyed, Merrill was a great cook and also loved fine meals prior to the pandemic. So the pandemic was coming, and we knew, and we managed to get Zia out of Malaysia. So that was accomplishment number one. But then we looked at each other and we said, well, we might have to hunker down, so we might need one more passport stamp. So we basically, so Anwar Ibrahim got us a car and a driver. And so we took a 5-hour car ride to Singapore just to get a passport stamp, which was quite the journey. And then once we got there, she was like, well, since we're here, why don't we go to the Raffles Hotel, which is like, it's A, historic, B, kind of pricey. And she said, we're going to have one fine meal, I think, since we're going to be locked up for who knows how long with this pandemic, we'll have one fine meal. So we had a wonderful, I imagine lobster was involved, because she is a fanatic for lobster. So lots of seafood, a wonderful dinner at this fancy, very colonial hotel. And it looked really bad, two white folks sitting at a colonial hotel in Singapore on the eve of the world being flipped upside down. Then we quickly got our passport stamped and went back home, and have just kind of been here ever since. We managed, celebrated her last birthday back in June, had again, delivered lobster, which was actually much better than we thought it was going to be. And so, yeah, it's, I'll miss her because it was going down to the forum for me. Whenever I'd go down to Merrill's, I had my little shopping list. I usually had to pick up her meds. I would hand the medication list over to the pharmacist. They'd look at it and they'd look at me and they'd say, can I recommend you making some lifestyle choice differences? Because this, oh no, it's not for me. This is, for my friend. So, yeah, it's too bad because I haven't been able to do that as much because we've been very limited in our movements and we've gone back to a sort of MCO and the cases here have been pretty bad. So yeah, but she's given me quite the list of movies, and I suppose I have to read more Jane Austen now to try and catch up to some of the left in that department. So. Thanks. Sorry, I probably went on for way too long. No, I'm just blabbering.
Thank you, Scott. That was a beautiful insight into Merrill's Malaysian adventures in these past few years. I think one regret I think I have is I never went to Merthyr Tydfil. In fact, it was Ehsan and Zir who said to me, "You have to go. You have to spend a weekend with Merryl." This was way back in my early days at the Muslim Institute, just soak up her knowledge, and for various, I don't know, no good reason, I never quite made the journey, but I always envisaged this sort of this fascinating sort of former coal mining place, and I tried to imagine her house, because I remember one day I sort of said to Merryl, I called her on the phone because, we have these 4-hour conversations on the phone. And I said, oh, Merryl, did you get my email? I sent it last week. And she was like, oh, Samia, I haven't been up to the attic. And that's where the computer is. So I haven't seen your email. I haven't been up there for 2 weeks. So I just imagined her living in this sort of rickety, multi-story house with an attic. Where her study and her computer is, and that's where she checks her email. But one person who has been to Merthyr Tydfil is Uzma. Uzma, are you there? I know that as a Cardiff girl, you often visited. You went to visit Merryl in Merthyr, didn't you? Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your visit there. Uzma? Are you on mute? Or have you?
Hello?
Uzma, is that you?
Yeah, sorry, I literally just popped out to go to the bathroom for about a minute, so I've just come back. And I caught the second half of the sentence, which was, and you visited her in Merthyr, and I was like, is that about me? I don't know. So,
I was just inviting you to share your memories of
visit to Merthyr. Okay, let me put my video on. Hi, assalamu alaikum everyone. I mean, it's been super touching to talk about Merryl and how she impacted the lives of so many people, and she obviously, has touched so many of us. How did my visit to Merthyr come about? So I had been aware of Merryl in a very similar way, I suppose, to the way that Ehsan has mentioned, like being a kind of a young Muslim, trying to figure out your way in the world. And then every so often you'd see like Merryl on YouTube or on the TV or something, and it'd just be like this beam of lucidity, and you'd be like, yeah, no, I get that, I relate to that. And so then I, through various Google rabbit holes, realized that she was associated with the Muslim Institute and started coming to the Muslim Institute events. And I'd met her, I think probably the first time was probably in about 2008, and I sort of met her on and off. And so a lot of my high school teachers were from like the South Wales Valleys, so they had like this similar accent to Merryl, and I'd be like, Merryl, I recognize your accent, it's the one that inspires me to learn. And she always found that really amusing. So then, just because I was in Cardiff like for a few weeks with my parents, I just sort of shot off an email to Merryl and said, I'll get the train up to Merthyr and we can just chat. And so, yeah, I just got the train up from near where my parents live. And I don't know if anyone's ever like got the train up from one of the cities in like South Wales up to the valleys, but weirdly, even though you just get the sense that you're going into a place where the big TV stations and the big newspapers have completely forgotten about this place, and it's a place unto its own and a very unique place. And it's, if you get the train up from Cardiff, it's almost like you get to a point where you're cocooned in, like, depending on the time of year, in like greenery and mountains. It's really beautiful and very unique experience. And so I got in the taxi, I remember, and the cabbie was a bit like, what's someone like you from Cardiff doing in Merthyr? And I was like, I'm coming to visit one of my friends, and he was a bit like, well, I mean, watch your back in Merthyr. And I'm like, oh, don't worry, I understand the valleys. I've got like friends and family who run businesses in the valleys. And he was like, but you don't understand, this is Merthyr. And I was like, how terrible can this place be? Like, really? He's been very kind of melodramatic. And I told Merryl this, and she's like literally weeping. She thought it was the funniest thing. And so then, like, one of Merryl's many hidden talents, she had taken it upon herself to like cook for me. And so she taught me how to char grill a chicken breast, which I had no idea. I had vaguely seen it on Ready Steady Cook like once or twice in my life, but she gave me a step-by-step lesson in how to char grill a chicken breast. And then we talked for about 4 hours, and I had not scheduled in that slot of like just 4 hours of like chatting about everything, and the whole idea of like her having like such an expansive and hyper associative intellect, really struck me. And she had such a generosity of intellect as well as a generosity of spirit, and also she was I just got the impression that she was a very emotional person in a very kind of authentic sense. So if she was talking about her family, and a member of her family had gone through like a phase of suffering or whatever, her eyes would water over, that was such like an authentic humanity. But then she had her kind of intellectualism like running in parallel as well, which I think is quite a kind of a collection of very unique qualities. So we talked about basically post-war Wales until like the modern day, and I mean, I'm really sad that Merryl has gone. And one of the things which I had kind of made a mental note of was, if I'm fortunate enough to see Merryl again, number one, if I ever got the opportunity, I'd always suggest that she start using nicotine patches, and she didn't take to that very lightly. It'd kind of be a bit of a cross between a wry smile and a scowl, and also comment about, oh, I'm an old woman and this is one of the joys left in my life. Leave me alone, you annoying young person. And then, but obviously in the best humor. And the other thing which used to irritate her a little bit was the fact that I would talk about how I was quite interested in the self-determination of Wales and like the rights of Welsh language speakers. And if you got her just in the right mood, she'd kind of like go on this kind of slightly performative rant about how Welsh language speakers were the real fascists. And that would just make me laugh. And then I'd sort of troll her and be like, that's not true, Merryl. Their language was banned in the late 19th century. And, you believe in human rights as well. And then she'd like talk about how, she had not got a job because she didn't have Welsh as a language and stuff. But the way I sort of made sense of Merryl was the fact that she was from like quite an impressive lineage of mining trade union activists. So she had a real strong sense of the fact that in order to like pursue social justice, you need to do it in a very kind of practical and organized way. And also from that kind of cultural milieu of Wales, there were also some really like impressive autodidacts who just wouldn't take the kind of the English establishment anymore in terms of like the way they were being exploited, and set up their own educational institutions and set up their own universities and that sort of thing. And also there's like a phrase in like a Raymond Williams essay, I think it might be Who Speaks for Wales, but I don't remember. And again, it's quite apt, I suppose, I'm bringing up Raymond Williams because again, he's had very expansive intellect and career. But he talks about how there's a thing within like Celtic and Welsh culture about we are going to learn the tools that you've used to oppress us, your cultural tools that you've used to oppress us, and we are going to school you in those cultural tools. And by that I mean that he talked a lot about the kind of the silver-tanned Celt who will run circles around anyone in the English establishment who's trying to oppress them by using their own tools of like intellectualism and just almost like learning to spell better than them and in a more accurate and pertinent sort of way. So I always kind of thought of Merryl as like coming from that tradition of very fiery Celtic autodidacts, but then she was a real globalist as well, in that obviously she had had her own spiritual journey and she had really traveled. So yeah, like a really incredible, unique person. I just feel like I was so privileged and blessed to have her in my life. And like also really odd that in some respects she, when I was like in my late teens, early 20s, she was like to me like this kind of really, you know, well-established intellectual and broadcaster and that sort of thing. But you know, when I approached her as just another person to person, she was like the most down-to-earth and generous person and really cared about your welfare. And I suppose that's all I really have to say.
Thanks, thanks, Uzma, and you're so right. She was incredibly down to earth, yet in possession of such a kind of such an intellect and wealth of knowledge that she was always so happy to share with everyone in her hours and hours of conversation. I think do I see Sarah Sharif? Assalamu alaikum, sorry, are you there? I wonder whether I could ask you to sort of say a few words about you know, sort of
sorry,
Merryl.
Yeah. Sorry, I've just lost the light here for a minute. I hadn't put myself down to speak, but
sorry, I know you hadn't, but I just thought you know, it would be great to hear sort of from, you know, your experience with Merryl in the early days. So. Yeah.
To be honest, before my mum passed away, we lost a friend, and my mum said something like, "Oh, I feel like a bit of me has gone." And I've never, apart from when my own parents passed away, I've never felt like that. But when I heard about Merryl, I had that feeling, and I understood what my mum had mentioned. I just remember her as being extremely gregarious, extremely generous. But this thing about you know, supporting young people and helping them to make understand the world that they were in, making them proud of their identity, but also making them think critically about what the problems really were with the Muslim community, but how the way the West were framing those problems could be challenged. I think this is what I got the most from Merryl. And it just transformed my way of thinking and understanding, and you know, the sense that I could make of what I was experiencing, as you know, same like a lot of the other people in the 80s and 90s, just coming to consciousness about what was happening around us. So this is what I really remember, and this is what I would be, you know, internally grateful to her for, and pray for her maghfirat and for her you know, rahmat for her, because of, you know, the legacy of knowledge and care and critique that she helped us to become aware of, the tools that she gave us to understand what we're going through. The last time I think several of us met her was that we're, you know, the Association of Muslim Researchers is still sort of functions in a small way, and our main activity in recent years has been going away for a long weekend in the countryside. And one year we chose Brecon Beacons, and we always have a guest speaker to come and join us for what we call the fireside chats. On a Saturday evening, we'll all gather around a big bonfire, have a barbecue meal, and then invite somebody to speak with us. And that guest also stays overnight. And so Merrill was brilliant. And then overnight, I think she was probably up until the wee small hours, long after I'd gone to bed, you know, talking to all the young people, and then stayed with us for a little bit of the Sunday morning as well. And it was just such a happy, life-affirming person, really. And it's just we really do feel her loss. Some of the I knew I had a series of some of the books that I think Zia and Merrill had cooperated on, but I'm certainly going to get hold of the anthropology one, because I think it's probably one that I've missed out on. I've heard a lot about it, and I'm to be honest, I'm really concerned that there's been no obituary in the mainstream press about her, and I just wonder if there's something like that should be organized, because she was such an important figure in the intellectual, you know, sort of development of the Muslim community here and in Western thinking generally. And I think it's a real shame that more people don't know about her. That's really all I would say. And I really applaud you for organizing this.
Yeah. Samia, where are you?
Oh, we seem to have lost Samia briefly. Why don't we, oh, Samia, you're back.
Oh, Samia is back.
You're still on mute. Thanks, Samia.
Sorry about that. Just a technical hitch just there. Yes, no, we do. Scott and I put together something that's up on the Muslim Institute website, and also I think Ahmed Versi has printed an obituary in the Muslim News, and we're working on a piece for the mainstream media as well. So that's definitely something that we're organising. Thank you so much, Sarah. Sorry for bringing that on you. Actually, if Ahmed, I saw Ahmed earlier. Ahmed, are you there? He may have gone actually. Okay.
There is one particular fact about Merrill that I would like to mention.
Go on, Zia.
Yeah. I think it is probably not widely known that Merrill was the second person in the whole wide world who, as a single woman, went to Saudi Arabia and went to the Haram. The first person to do that was Lady Evelyn Cobalt, who was also who also embraced Islam and was part of the big, you know, Lord Hadley group of Muslims who had converted. And she was a close friend of King Abdulaziz. In Merrill's case, we had to get a special permission from the king, who in those days was King Fahd. So King Fahd wrote a specific kind of a letter, which then Merrill had to take with her and at the airport. So she was allowed to come in as a single woman, and then was taken to Makkah Hilton, where the conference was being organized. That in fact I was working on myself. Following day, of course, Merrill couldn't wait to go to the Haram, and I was busy organizing things. So I asked my friend Zafar Malik to take her there. And according to Zafar, she just walked in and kind of fell to her knees and started weeping, and was there quite some time. I mean, what most people don't realize, that Merrill had a very deep spiritual sense. but I suppose like me, she didn't want to. She didn't like to display. I mean, both of us had one of the reasons why we was so close to each other is that we disliked the kind of outward representation of piety. Or she used to call the people the heavy yun. She didn't like the heavy yun. You know, we have to keep away from the heavy yun, and we have to keep the young people away from the heavy yun, right? But she was a very, very, very deeply person, this deeply spiritual person. So the few days later, we were given a special dispensation to actually go inside the Kaaba. And I remember I had a brief discussion with Merrill. She asked me, are you going to go inside the Kaaba? And I said, I'm not sure. And then I asked her, do you want to go inside the Kaaba? And she said, after a little discussion, she's not sure. So we had a little discussion and we came to the conclusion that neither of us will go inside the Kaaba because the symbolism of the Kaaba was external and not internal. Once you are inside, there is no orientation. The symbolism, the sense of direction comes from being outside it, not inside it. So like most of the participants lined up to go inside the Kaaba in the middle of the night when it was organized, but me and Merrill didn't actually go in. But it is important to realize that Merrill is the second person in history to go to Mecca as a single woman. Hopefully there'll be a lot more in the future.
Wow, that's quite an anecdote. I feel like at this stage I'd like to bring in Brandino and our Campalungo crew. Where's Brandino?
I'm here. Hi.
So Brandino, tell us a little bit about how Merrill ended up at your summer house in Italy.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yeah. Yes, I can hear you.
All right. Oh yes. Yes, Merrill. I'm very angry with Merrill actually, because I was really getting ready to have a long conversation with her, and she left, and that wasn't really good. You know, I was really sad about that, because
very inconvenient of her, wasn't it?
Very inconvenient. I really think so, because I mean, and it shows how one should never ever put things away for the future. You know, one should always, you want to do something, do it. You know, just do it. And I feel quite bad because Merrill had a very strong influence. I mean, I'm not saying she changed my world, but she certainly gave me something very precious, an insight in a couple of things. And anyway, I'm not going to that, but so yes, I will miss her. I will definitely miss her. About Italy. Well, I mean, you know, Merrill was at home everywhere, because she's gone all over the world. She was there. I think she enjoyed it. I really don't know much what else to say, because it was a very interesting gathering that we had. I wish we could do more of them, but Merrill was always a sort of a pivotal person there as well. Like, I think in most places where she was and participated in. I don't know. I mean, if you want to ask me some questions, maybe I can answer them. But I'm not. I mean, to me, it was just a completely smooth, you know, wonderful time. And what more can I say?
Maybe
but to ask.
I'll bring in Layla to perhaps contextualize.
Layla, yeah, sure. Layla, tell us about Campolungo.
About Campolungo.
Hello, Layla.
Hey, hi. I didn't expect that I had to say something on this.
Just explain, how did we end up at? How did me, you, Merrill, Halima, the Siddiqui, and the Gowries? How did we end up at Campolungo? Oh, and of course Burhan. Mustn't forget Burhan.
I don't know for sure how exactly we ended up there, but we had this plan to have these spring conversations in Campolungo, right? And Brandino was so wonderful to offer this very, very lovely house for that. And so we went there. What was it, 2014?
It was, I think it was 14 or
2014, I think.
Yes, something like that.
And it was a very, very lovely spring. It was, well, it was a chilly spring. It was not, we thought, oh, we're going to Italy and it will be nice and sunny there. It wasn't quite as expected. There was sun, but it was still quite cold.
I remember
And
the Siddiquis had come from Dubai, isn't that right, Auntie Talat and Siddiqui? And they were quite shocked by the coolness of the Italian spring.
But yes, it was very cold actually. I don't know if you can still hear me, but it was quite cold, and people were complaining. And I know of one person who complained quite strongly, but I won't give names now. But he was quite right, because I was cold myself. It was a very cold April, and it wasn't supposed to be so cold. I'm sorry.
yeah, it's
But
okay.
no, I know. Yes, it was. I'm sure it was okay. It was,
I wasn't the person who complained particularly, by the way. I just want to mention that.
The truth is that I don't remember the person's name, because I'm hopeless with names, so I
Good.
apologize for that. But
That's even better.
I think Layla had a good time as well, and
I had a very good. We all had a great time there. The discussion was.
The thing about Campolungo, if I may intervene for a second,
Oh.
is that it's not such a beautiful place. Yes, it has a nice view and things like that, but it's not such a beautiful place. It's I think it is hopefully a welcoming place, so that it's made by the people who are there, and you know, if nice people are there, it becomes a very nice place, and otherwise not. And so really, what did Campolungo was you people, and well, us all together, I suppose, and it was very pleasant. And thank you for coming. Not so much that I was, you know, generous. I was very, very grateful of you coming.
So Leila, you were sharing a room with Merrill, weren't you?
For a few nights, yes. I'm not sure what I want to share about that, actually.
Okay. Well, essentially, we had a wonderful.
We had a wonderful retreat there, yes.
Yeah. And Merrill was the life and the soul, as you can imagine.
And perhaps I might just add a small, very small detail. Carmen, who made some wonderful food for us all.
Which Merrill definitely appreciated.
And sorry.
I can remember. Yeah, Merrill definitely appreciated the food.
Yeah, and she was that was another beautiful part of that long weekend, because it was somewhere that where somebody like Carmen could interlope, if that's a word, with us, and share with us, and she was very much into the whole scene and the whole sort of event, you know, very much, and she was happy to show what Campolungo could do. I mean, she doesn't do this normally. I mean, she was coming, but apart from everything else, she's a very good cook, and she makes some very delicious Peruvian food. When we've been to her house a couple of times, Anna and I. And may I just say one last thing? Why don't you come again? Come on, Samia, organize another Campolungo event.
Yes, no, definitely, we shall. I think once this pandemic is
over, yeah,
we'll say yes to everything. Literally.
We will be very glad to come to Campolungo again.
It would be wonderful to have you. It would be make my heart very big.
So Leila, I think you perhaps you could tell us a little bit about. I read a very moving Facebook post by you talking about the way in which Merrill touched your life, and you mentioned the trip to Campolungo, but also you want to sort of tell us a little bit about what you wrote in that Facebook post?
Yes, you know what I mean, really, I can't really claim that I've been very close to Merrill, or even that I've met her often enough actually to know her as well as most people here do. But when I heard of her passing, it really shocked me, and it affected me in a way that I hadn't expected that it would affect me. Um, and I immediately remembered what a generous person she was, and I think this has been mentioned already by a couple of people here this evening, that she was especially generous towards young people. Um, and I first met Merrill, I think it was at the Winter Gathering in 2012, right? When I was invited for a panel discussion. And I was definitely very young back then, and I was very, very naive, very nervous, um, and very, I had this, I considered the Muslim Institute a very illustrious gathering. I mean, I'm not saying I don't anymore, I do, but at that time, I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be invited there, and I'm not sure if I'm ready to speak in front of these people. Actually, I had just finished my MA degree in anthropology at university, shortly before that, and I came also from, our academic world here in Germany is very hierarchical, and you don't really count much when you don't have a PhD yet, And I didn't really have this experience of being taken seriously as an academic as well. And I've also before that, I've never spoken about my personal story. And I was supposed to do both on that panel in Salisbury. And I mean, the whole Muslim Institute made me feel very, very welcome. A lot of the people who are here this evening were there as well, and made me feel that I didn't have, that how to say it, that I was worth being listened to, which doesn't sound like a big thing, but at that point in my life, it was a really, really important thing. And after the panel, on the panel, I had said something on being an anthropologist and what it means to be an anthropologist and go into a certain setting and change yourself through that, but also change the people around that. And so you are changed and the people around you are also changed. And after the panel discussion, Merrill came to me and said, this was one of the most significant things I've ever heard an anthropologist say. And that deeply touched me because she was an anthropologist as well. I considered myself just, a little bit a beginner in that field. She was such an important person, well-known, with a well-known name. And it meant a lot to me that somebody with that position and that expertise would say something so nice to me and take me seriously and appreciate what I had to say, which I considered quite banal, actually. And I think I underestimated what a huge influence that had on my further life. I mean, now I'm quite used to speaking. I'm on panels internationally. I'm organizing workshops all the time, talks all the time. But that was the very first occasion for me to do something like that, speaking on a panel. And I think if not somebody like her had come to me at that point and had shown me that my story was worth being listened to and my insights were important, then maybe I would have given up at some point. Maybe I would not have believed as much in myself. That gave me, it gave me that kick that I really needed right after finishing my MA to really go on and keep thinking, keep writing, keep talking. And I must say, after that, whenever I met her, each time she had something uplifting to say to me. You know, each time I met her, there was something that she conveyed to me that just again reminded me that I should go on and that I should keep following my path. And that's a very rare quality, you know. Only very few people can do that, constantly give you that feeling of, yes, you have something to say. Yes, please, what you're doing is good. And that's a true human quality.
Yes, I think I mean, you know, I think all of us can testify to the ability that Merrill had to relate to such a diverse range of people and make everybody feel incredibly seen and incredibly valid. And I think she just had this great humanity about her that was extremely accessible. I think I wonder if I might ask Batul, Batul, perhaps sorry to spring this on you, but I wonder if you wouldn't mind saying a few words about you know, sort of the way in which Merrill has influenced or certainly impacted you know, the convert community. You know, how she has kind of contributed to conversations on conversion. You there, Batul?
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. I feel a great honor and pleasure to be here and to be honoring Merrill in this particular way. Sarah Sharif said, you know, that she started off talking about how her mum talked about when people pass away and how something of you feel something of yourself has gone with them, and that was how I felt actually when I heard that Merrill had left us. And I said in my notice on Facebook and stuff that you know, that I just addressed her, dearest Merrill, you know, we are so distressed to see that you have left us, and that we won't be able to engage with you as we have done in the and that I hope, and maybe it's to do with my age that I feel like this, because I feel that there are people going to the other side now. I'm sort of caught in between two worlds, and constantly asking myself which one I would prefer to be in. And when somebody like Merrill leaves this world, I certainly feel and wish I was in the other world with her, because I think we would have a great time. We would laugh just incessantly about everything and have a wonderful time. Merrill contacted me when she converted to Islam first, and I'm not sure whether I met in Merthyr Tydfil, but I feel I have been there. I'm not sure really, I can't remember, but I feel I've been in a room, in a house where Merrill lived, and I'm sure it was in her house in Merthyr Tydfil. And we were talking, she had contacted me about the fact that she had converted to Islam, and that she was having some issues about some of the things, you know, and particularly one about wearing hijab, you know, which was so funny, really, because, you know, she lived in a very, in the countryside, you know, around people who knew her family and so on. And she felt, you know, that were she to go out wearing, you know, swathed in scarves and all the rest, that the natives around her were going to think, goodness me, what has happened? Has this lady, you know, was fallen from the sky? Something's really happened here. So I think the drama of outward expressions she preferred to put to one side in favor of the internal polishing of the heart. And I totally agree with Zia there. She wasn't one to wear Islam, her faith on her sleeve, but she was an incredibly spiritual person. And just in the chats, I noticed that Mufti Barakatullah said, you know, after he heard that Merryl had done Hajj and been allowed to come in, and I just, you know, that whole thing about Merryl Wynne Davies being allowed to come in and do Hajj is something really laughable to me. And I think she would have, Mufti Barakatullah, you said, you know, oh, you know, that there's all post 40 women age 40 can go on Umrah alone. And I'm thinking, yes, and why? And I think Merryl would have been incredibly, you know, she would have been incredibly strong in her criticism of things like that, because of course there's no absolute reason at all why women should be stopped from going on Hajj at any age. And I, you know, I often feel, you know, I remember saying to Merryl one time, you know, now we can go because we're 45, Merryl. I think, you know, our MOT has run out, or we've lost our mojo after 45, or I don't know what it is after 45 that allows us to go on Hajj. And we had a great laugh about that. But she was a fantastic character. She had an inimitable style of turning everything into comedy, really, in some ways. And I always say you could take the woman out of Wales, but you could never take the Welsh out of the woman. She was God's gift to Wales, and she was God's gift to the Muslim community of great strength, and a woman of incredible, you know, ingenuity. And she was just so much herself, even from the time she converted to Islam. She remained totally herself, totally that Welsh woman brought up, schooled, educated in Merthyr Tydfil and around that area, and she remained totally herself. And as a convert, she had a unique way about turning everything into a comic situation. And that was always great, because sometimes as converts to Islam, we whinge a lot about things, and we moan a lot about, you know, the lack of support and stuff like that. But, and we always become incredibly anxious and distressed about things because we feel the weight of the expectations that weigh heavily on our shoulders as converts to Islam. But Merryl had a wonderful way of, you know, of taking so much of these weighty situations and turning them into light-hearted banter. And even for the serious things, she had a way of maybe looking at some of the ridiculousness and the bizarre and the nonsensical about them. And she gave us all a buoyancy, you know, that you know, doesn't exist within the convert community sometimes. I loved her. I loved listening to her. I loved hearing what she had to say and how she managed to dissect things and present them in such an easy and manageable way, particularly for converts to Islam. And I certainly will miss her, and I look forward so much to meeting her in a better place where we have so much time to engage with each other, to laugh, to roll around the place and have a wonderful time, inshallah.
Inshallah, indeed. I can completely empathize. I can completely empathize with this missing talking to her. I think, Scott, probably you probably missed that too, you know, the latest developments in this crazy world we live in, and she just had so much, just such a forensic way of analyzing all that was going on in the world and offering such such insights and profundity.
I had two ways I could trigger Merrill if I wanted to, which Zia did this a lot more than I did. I tried not to do it because Zia would do it so often, but I would come into a room and I'd say, Merrill, Anwar needs you to do a talk on women and Islam. And she'd say, oh no. Or I would come in and say, Merrill, we need you to save the Ummah. And she'll say, oh, can't they save themselves? So, but she had this wonderful story of going to New Zealand, and they had asked her to do a talk on women and Islam because this is, you know, something that people felt she would be the authority on. So she gives this talk, and of course she had to go behind the curtain to give the talk, and so she's giving this talk to the women and riling them all up and speaking so loud that the men can hear and everything. And so the next day they had her for lunch with all of the leaders of the mosque there. I don't remember which ones. One of the ones in New Zealand. They were saying, "Oh yes, it's nice to meet you, but oh, you should have been here yesterday. There's this horrible woman who's making such a ruckus and distracting, you know, and revolutionizing everything." And she's sitting there. She's like, "That was me." So.
It's a point about her identity is when she converted to Islam. In fact, I remember going to the Central London Mosque with Zaki Badawi and all that. So afterwards, the question arose: is she going to change her name? And I said, oh, Mariam is a good name for you. And she turned around and said, look, I have changed my faith, not my identity. I am Merryl bin Davies, and I will remain Merryl bin Davies. And she never changed her name, which is good. I think that's how it should be.
I mean, she was just a champion of her working class, former mining roots. You know, to the end. You know, she traveled the world, visited so many, you know, different places. Was in places of great sort of privileged access. Yet she still remained, you know, so accessible and true to her origin. It was quite.
Building on that, so it was 1969 is when she went across the Sahara with a group of mates, and they bumped into a group of Irish monks, and I believe this was in Nigeria, and so they'd been in the Sahara throughout 1969, which as those of you who have read about it or lived through it, it was a pretty big year for things happening in both the UK, the US, and all over the place. And they said, okay, so what's the news? And so, well, two big things have happened. One, the British have sent troops into Ireland, and two, the Americans put a man on the moon. What the British put troops in Ireland? She had no care about what the spacemen were doing.
Yeah.
So
the way me and Scott used to annoy her, and we did a lot of this, by the way, was to play Tubular Bells. It's when Tubular Bells came along, I bought a record of Tubular Bells, and I used to play constantly. So when we were having these long conversations about how we are writing a book or how we're going to, you know, change the chapter or arguing about it, the Tubular Bells will be playing in the background. And so she got quite sick of it, and she hated it. So what we used to do is to, you know, knock on her door where she used to live in the office, Anwar Ibrahim's office, and play Tubular Bells on iPhone, and you could hear her fuming and throwing things at the door inside.
I wonder if I wonder if you have any memories you'd like to share.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
And can you see me?
Indeed.
All right. Assalamu alaikum and hello to everybody. I'm overwhelmed because I've been listening to all of you, and it has brought back lots of wonderful memories of a wonderful friend. We all miss her, and we will keep on missing her. I met her first time, I think, at Zia's place, and that was more than a quarter of a century ago. And some of the people who have been mentioned here, like Zafar and you know, several others, I had known them for quite some time. And sometimes after Salisbury winter gathering, we'll take the same train because I'll go back to Bath because I would have teaching next day on Monday, and Merrill will be heading towards her Welsh country home. So we'll, so in our informal session of winter gathering will go on, and the train generally, this train is very, very small and very much crammed, and we'll talk about all kinds of things. But one friend that we miss quite a bit is Ayub Malik. And Ayub Malik used to host all of us, Zia, Zafar, Merrill, myself, my wife, and several other friends. And we used to meet at his place, and there used to be loud discussion about all the issues that we talk about at winter gathering or at annual Ibn Rushd lecture, or what people talk about in Critical Muslim. So Ayub was full of energy, and Zia has mentioned him in his book, which I've been rereading, Desperately Seeking Paradise. And Pervez Manzoor, we shouldn't forget. And so there would be heated discussion, and then all of a sudden Ayub will say, ladies and gentlemen, no more discussion, and we should relax and all that. And then sadly, Ayub fell ill, and we took him to the hospital, and we all were sitting outside this hospital in a little restaurant, and we knew that that was a very difficult time. So we all put our heads together, and so that was a very, very touching moment. And then Ayub passed away. He was a single man, as you remember, and his siblings, some of them lived in Pakistan, some of them lived in America. And my wife and myself, we thought that it would be good to give him a burial in Oxford, because that's where we live. And Ayub, we had talked about it, and I think somehow we, in those critical weeks, Ayub had given his nod as well. And I remember when we brought his body to Oxford, hundreds of people turned up. And generally our mosques are not very women friendly, as you know, Muslim women or non-Muslim women. But somehow this mosque, the main mosque in Oxford, opened up. And Ayub's colleagues and lots of other friends, and Merrill, and 20%, I think, people there in the funeral prayer were women, and they were all in one hall. And this was a fascinating, I think, experience for all of us, and especially for the people who had gathered for their Zohar prayer, and then most of them stayed on to do funeral. And then after the burial, we had arranged a send-off for Ayub Marhum at my college at Wilson College. And Merrill was one of the main speakers, and I just requested her to talk about Ayub and to talk about our associations and all those kind of things. So I remember her readiness to give a talk, and there were about 120 people. I'm sure Zia and everybody else who was there remembers that. So I have such fond memories, and I do appreciate her intellectual vigor and the way Muslim Institute was established, Ehsan Masood and Siddiqui Sahab and everybody else. And it carries on. And I think by carrying on with these activities, I think we'll be offering the due credit and appreciation to her multifaceted personality. Definitely we'll miss her. But it reminds me of Sheikh Sadi, the great sage, the Mullah Mikhlaq from Persian literature, 13th century, when he said, خیر کن افلان و غنیمت شمار عمر، خیر کن افلان و غنیمت شمار، پیش از آن که بانگ براید فلان نماند. افلان, you person, do something good, do something nice, before your time comes, and the person who gives the call for the prayer in the mosque announces your departure. So we are remembering the departure of a very close friend, a very vigorous intellectual, a very concerned, cosmopolitan person. And I think we'll keep on remembering her. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Iftikhar. That was so beautifully expressed. Gosh, I don't know how to follow that. Salik, sorry, I almost forgot you. Salik, you wanted to say a few words, didn't you? Salik? Salik, are you there? Just unmute yourself. I don't know, maybe. Salik, I can see you, but maybe you're away from the keyboard. No? Salik? Okay. Is there anybody else who I haven't got around to calling on to say a few words?
How about Shahid?
Shahid, I'm saving till the end.
Maybe Fadullah Wilmot wants to say something. Are you there, Fadullah? Can you hear us?
Yes, I am. Yeah, I'm in Australia. It's 5 a.m. in the morning. But I felt I really had to say that how amazing Merryl was, and how fantastic her mind was, and what a great impression her books and her writing and her personality had on me personally. She was absolutely fantastic person, and I was absolutely shocked to hear that. I was talking with Zia, and I said I must meet her in Malaysia, but I missed her because I usually whiz her in and out. And then now this COVID came, and I wasn't able to get back to Malaysia. So just, I was so impressed. She was such a fantastic person, and it's a great loss to humanity and to the Muslim world. And really, I can't say any more than that. She's such an impressive person, and her intellectual contribution, about America, about the other, is just amazing, and anthropology, and sort of emphasizing now what many people have come to realize. You don't have to talk about the Islamization of knowledge and that sort of thing. You really need to bring an Islamic moral, ethical approach to understanding things. So that's all I'd like to say. Thanks, Zia.
Thank you for that. I think Sally.
So if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go back to sleep now. I just had to come in and say that. Okay, guys.
Thank you for waking up so early. Thank you.
No, I just had to do it. Even though I was busy discussing causality and with Halim Rahim from Griffith University last night until 2 a.m. Our time. We were discussing Ibn Sina, Ibn Razi, and then the fate of Muslim women. But then I said, no, I have to set the alarm. It didn't wake me up until 5 o'clock, but no, I just had to do it. She's such an amazing person. And thank you, Zia, for calling on me, and thank you for this opportunity. And good night, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fazla. Good night. Salik, you're unmuted now.
Oh, brilliant. Sorry about that. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, well, it was, I was trying to sort out my video. I couldn't get it. So I was trying to connect the laptop at the same time as the desktop, but unfortunately couldn't get that. But I could hear everything. Yeah, I was like, this is going back some time ago. I was much younger. And 2002, I think, they came to Manchester. Shamim probably left, but there was a let me see. I was recently tidying all my books from the loft, and I came across a particular article of the New Internationalist, which during the riots in Oldham, this is going back some time, and the Zia and Merrill came down, and we were quite young and naive in a sense in our intellectual outlook of things. But from that event, when I first met her, she was very, like everyone was saying, she became many things to many people, and that was amazing about her. And from that first experience, I was fortunate enough to meet her on the train journey to London. And I was really surprised at how should I approach this person. But I sat next to her, and she was very, very 3 hours. And I'm usually, I don't know you guys, but I'm quite shy when I talk in public. When I'm one-to-one, I like to talk quite a lot. And I got 3 hours of constantly asking her all these questions that I had. And she paid complete attention to me and kind of answered them to my satisfaction. And from there, this is some years back when Zia and others in Muslim Institute organized these brainstorming sessions. And we used to visit, and Merrill was there on occasions. We used to meet her as well. Me and Shamim, after that, we used to go around the British Library at the time and visit these bookshops. And we got these things of collecting books. And I came across Merrill's book, hardback copy, which Amazon don't even have unlisted properly. So I was quite proud of that. But generally, gonna really miss her actually, because really I was talking to Scott some time ago and really wanted to go down and talk to her and really engage and absorb her just company and learning. Really touched us and made a big difference. Otherwise, you wouldn't see us, myself and Shamim and others coming to the Muslim Institute. Kind of transformed our outlook and things. Yeah, with this COVID people, environment that we're in, we had about, I've been to the grave about 6 times, bearing within the rules. And when we leave this, we don't really take anything with us. It's just a small, in Manchester is quite interesting because the way it's laid out is very, in a sense, it's very Islamic, that you could see that the body is usually taken out of the coffin, or they can bury it in the coffin. But when we get to see that, this is where we end up, and we don't really take a lot with us. It's quite profound, and the Merrill passed away, and all these emotions were quite strong in that sense. But it's always, I miss you got everybody that not seen from the Muslim Institute gatherings and stuff. It's a unique bunch of people, and I don't think there's anything like that. But it's like, in a sense, a family that you've, I've had anyway, in that sense. But I really, and one thing is very approachable. I found Zia, and first time I remember getting the Futures magazine, and I used to write in the New Statesman. Then I read his article, found it quite interesting, and I contacted him directly, phoned his house, and I thought, what shall I call him? And I said, it's Professor Zia there. And one thing I found about them, they were very real and not this, very high up, but very approachable. And I think that's really good. If you have questions, you can approach people that have understanding and can really make an impact in your life and your outlook. Recently, I was looking at all these questions still going through, making sense of the world and other things, and came across Muhammad Assad's video, which is quite interesting, and the Quran translator, and he was saying that he means something to God in the greater scheme of things, otherwise he would not have been created. And I thought that was quite profoundly interesting. So I think in that time sense, if we do believe in that continuation of time, we just hopefully one day we'll meet again in a better place. So anyway, thank you very much for giving me a bit of time, and all the best to everybody. Assalamu alaikum.
Welcome, Sam. Thank you, Salik. That was really very moving. Thank you for your reflections. I don't know if what do you think? Should we get Shahid to? Well, I think we need some memories from Shahid and Jabin, and then.
I think Jabin wants to say something first.
Yeah, I wanted to say something because Merrill was very much to do with my first experience of the Muslim Institute. And I think we may have gone for our first time was probably the second gathering that you guys had. And I remember she gave us out forms to fill in to become fellows. And she said, nobody is going home until they fill these forms in. And because I'd had such a good experience, I've never experienced anything like Muslim Institute. And I just said to Shine, I'm filling this in now because I'm not going home. I'm not going to wait to fill it in at home. I'm doing it right now. You know, she was such a vibrant character. And with that, with her good sense of humor, her wit, you know, the way she was so eloquent, she knew the exact word to say. You know, I really admired that. You know, she could just pinpoint the word, you know, and she was captivating to listen to. You know, you could never get bored when Merryl talks. You know, all her talks, they were just, you know, worth listening to. And she had a great deal of knowledge because when we went to Wales, there was something that no, it wasn't Wales, it was
Capilungo,
Italy. Yeah, when we went to Italy, there was something that I couldn't get an answer to. It was a question, a theological question in the Quran, and nothing that I could. I read. I wasn't satisfied with it, and I said to Shahid, I'm going to ask Merryl. And it was that first evening. When we just arrived and we had tea or something, and we were with her alone. And I asked this question. I cannot remember what it was about, but she gave me a satisfactory answer. And you know, she had a very deep and you know, good understanding of you know, of religion. So yeah, she will definitely be, you know, I mean, and the times that she hasn't been at the gathering, you know, we miss her. You know, she will definitely be missed. I just wanted to say that. Yeah. So Shahid can say a bit now.
All right. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, certainly, I sort of feel very privileged that I got to know her, especially the trip at Campolungo. You know, the time we spent there. I know she was a little bit. You know, I don't know whether she was within herself at that time, and you know, I think there was a suggestion that she should go to this trip just to revive her a little bit, get her back into it. And I think we managed that because, you know, initially she didn't want to chair the meetings. I started off doing it, but then probably looking at the way I was doing it, she probably thought, I can do better than this. And, you know, she got involved and she was very much part of, you know, running the whole show. And we're very fortunate to have known her. And I think you wanted me to sort of read a poem. Is that right, Samia?
Yes, Shahid.
Yeah, I mean, the poem isn't relevant. I mean, she's in it because she's basically been part of this building up of the Muslim Institute over the years. And this was something I wrote a couple of years ago, which was about my Muslim Institute experience so far. So it's about a little bit how I got involved, and you know, you'll recognize some of the characters and some of the incidents, I hope. But anyway, this is the way it goes. My Muslim Institute experience so far. I was asked by Misha to say some words today based on Samia's praise for my performances of yesterday. It made me feel quite select, but also filled me with circumspect. What? To repeat the same old poem year after year? You know the poem I mean, the one I call Charso Bis, the one you can't remember, so you ask me to annually repeat. So before the professor calls out my name once again, I thought I'd try to write something new and risk my declining fame. But alas, the spirit, emotion, and passion of the past has deserted me as my poetic pen struggles to restart. I'd like to think the years have made me wise and smart, but I can hear my wife mutter, "Ha, fat chance." It was in 2011 that I came across the Muslim Institute on the net. The winter gathering titled Meaning of Life in Salisbury was set. Alas, 7 years have now passed by and I'm still no brighter, and any request for a subscription refund is met with much laughter. Anyway, I told my wife that I was planning to go to it. To my shock, she said, "Me too." I said, "Who was it?" The confusion finally over, we were on our way. We arrived in Salisbury and the rest is history, as they say. At this point, I thought my poem should really stop, but then I felt some of you had not yet suffered enough. So let me now describe the characters I have seen. The first was a good girl who looked barely out of her teens. She was protected by a fearsome lady that could smoke a few and a dodgy-looking character from, I think, Peru. He questioned us to check for Wahhabi links and then marched us off to Mr. Masood with a wink. To my surprise, my wallet at this point was still secure, but I swear the flag of Wales breathed and I was overcome by fear. Suddenly then the room lit up and it became ever so bright. No, it wasn't Zia walking in. Someone had just turned on the light. The man himself then finally arrived like a Raj, all the way from Oxford. It was Dr. Ban the Burqa Taj. In the front sat Sardar with hair not quite as long as mine, firing comments with inquisitive intelligence, so sharp, rare, and fine. Over the years, he's questioned a few and we've seen much fun. Like the time one keynote speaker had enough and tried to run. But Butt was there to chase him and save the day. And Kavi Sahib, like a stern headmaster, had the final say. Yes, that reminds me that sadly we have also lost a few. Kavi, Nisba, Najah, Shaukat, and also our dear Merryl too. Their contributions now in the past continue to live on in the platform which our future is still being built upon. Over the years, many interesting and varied topics were discussed. But for some of us, the main events were breakfast, dinner, and lunch. Oh yes, there was a girl who complained the focus was not Islamic enough. But Sardar stood up and cried, "Nare Takbir," which satisfied her lust. I've seen the management change, but never did envision the current MI director's Machiavellian ruthless rise and ambition. So if any of you are planning to go out and misbehave tonight, then please be warned, just do so out of Samia's sight. But if you do escape and make it into the refreshing dark night, you might be overcome by smoke surrounding a mysterious light. With fondness, I recall her adamant denial and the funny sight of fellows wandering aimlessly in pajamas in the chilly night. It was in this spirit of enjoyment that we all learnt and grew. To Gaya Sab, Sia, Merrill, Samia, Hassan, and Ehsan too, I say thank you. Thank you also to those I have not mentioned or made fun of yet, but it is because of all of you that these gatherings are so best. Thank you.
That was beautiful. Thank you, Shahid. I think we'll bring this this evening to a close on that note. Thank you for all your wonderful memories and your shared recollections of Merrill. I think I don't know. I think a lot of people have said to me that the sort of the force of emotion they felt from learning about her death has been quite surprising. But I think that's the way in which she has impacted so many of our lives in a way that we often we didn't quite realize how much she has meant to us. I mean, she certainly impacted mine a great deal, and I will miss her very much. Zia, I don't know if you want to say anything else. If not, I'll just
No, it's okay.
Okay, but thank you to everyone. Thank you, Merrill, for being the light that you are and bringing us together like this. If I could hand over to Mufti Bakatullah, who will end with a dua. Thank you, Mufti Bakatullah, and then we will close.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum. Sorry for, not contributing in any other way, but of course the legacy and the enduring work and very Welsh contribution to Islam and Muslim community should be and would be remembered. And knowing, the Valley of Welsh it has a distinct characteristic from the British way of doing things. Yeah, so it is a unique contribution, and I think either we should devote an issue of our magazine or one day for the legacy, thought, and post Merrill development of the anthropology among the Muslims. Yeah. So let us, just pray. We are sure that her becoming Muslim was the biggest, her contribution and biggest reward, irrespective of anything else. So it is a big step in a life, and the one who can take that step, that is only acceptable in the eyes of Allah, and she will meet with brave heart and brave contributions, and our good wishes are with her. We and many of us who are born Muslim, we look forward and look towards the aspiring and towering contribution of non-Muslim, really, new Muslims. Yeah, recently I had a 1-hour program about a new Muslim's contribution to the Muslim Islamic literature, which is really unique in even 1,000 years of history. So there are really newcomers to Islam whose contribution outshines many of us like poor Muslim, really. And really it just gives us really impetus to work harder and work unique and work really in a manner which is outstanding and unique. So let us just say our prayers in dua, and we start with the درود شريف. اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم. اللهم اغفر لحينا وميتنا وشاهدنا وغائبنا وصغيرنا وكبيرنا وذكرنا وأنثانا اللهم شاهدنا وغائبنا. اللهم اغفر لها وارحمها واعف عنها واغفر لها وارحمها. أبدلها دارا خيرا من دارها وأهلا خيرا من أهلها وعائلة خيرا من عائلتها. اللهم اغفر خطاياها. اللهم تجاوز عن سيئاتها. اللهم إن كانت محسنة فزد في حسناتها، وإن كانت مسيئة فتجاوز عن سيئاتها. اللهم أدخلها الجنة وأعذها من عذاب القبر ومن فتنة القبر. اللهم إنا نسألك من خير ما سألك منه عبدك ونبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، ونعوذ بك من شر ما استعاذك من عبدك ونبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. Oh Allah, we are thank you for giving us gift of life and making us survive this pandemic. Those who could not survive, you have accepted their contribution and invited into your audience. So may Allah grant them the status of shuhada of this intellectual endeavor which they have done. So all the people who have passed away during this pandemic, whether anywhere in the world, Allah accept them as the martyrs of the Muslim and Islamic community. And oh Allah, relieve us from all the pandemic and other issues, and give us the opportunity to do what is required of us and contribute towards the welfare of the humanity. In the line of what the Merryl Davies she did, and she gave us a torching light, as a torch of light. And may Allah give us tawfiq and empower us to contribute to the welfare of the humanity better and more effective one, and not really just be like an ordinary people. So Allah accept all our efforts, and Allah accept our asking for forgiveness and elevating her in the ranks among all the new entrants who endure so many sufferings, but still they carry on all their life and still outperform many born Muslims. So Allah accept her effort and our own association with her. Allah give us and empower us also to do better and contribute in each and every field of life which is now require our attention. And post-pandemic, may Allah give us, empower us to extend our abilities and our resources and contribute towards the whatever is pleasure and the positive contribution to the world. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. صلى الله تعالى على خير خلقه محمد وآله وأصحابه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. I have led some janazas really during pandemic. It was really very, very touching for many people, even not just the participant, even anybody who really even leads the janaza prayer. It's a very, very unique time. And those of us who have survived, may Allah, accept our survival. It means we have been given extra lease of life, extra time, overtime to play our penalty shootout. Yeah.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye. Assalamu alaikum. Take care.
Salam, everybody.